سارة، صار عندي حادث سيارة واتصلت بالمحامي قاجي.
قصدين أنتي المحامي قاجي؟
يعني هذا المكتب اللي قالوا عليه أكبر مكتب محاماة عربي كلداني بأمريكا، قاجي؟
لا أنا محامي بالقاجي لا، أنا أعرف لورنس هو قال لي قاجي لا.
أنا أعرف العائلة زين يقولوها قاجي.
بعد أي حادث سيارة اتصلوا بي، أنا محامي لورنس قاجي. 248-702-6641 248-702-6641.
أعزائي المستمعين، أهلا وسهلا بكم مرة أخرى في برنامج المحامي لورنس قاجي. معي في الاستوديو اليوم المحامي جان شرودر. Welcome, Mr. John.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure as always.
أهلا وسهلا بك. وأيضا معنا الأخت العزيزة ست تمارا الباراليغل اللي ترجم من العربي للإنجليزي ومن الإنجليزي للعربي. نشكرها ونتعبها، فعلا متعبيها إحنا. واليوم المحامي لورنس قاجي عنده محكمة فمو ويانا اليوم، فإن شاء الله يكون معنا الأسبوع القادم. أهلا وسهلا.
أهلا وسهلا بالجميع.
طبعا دائما احنا عندنا مواضيعنا.
أعتقد صوتي ما كان موجود قبل شوي، فأهلا وسهلا بالجميع.
هسه طلع صوتك.
يس.
هسه كل زين. أنت حسيتي من التسجيل. طبعا دائما نتحدث عن مواضيع حساسة طبعا. مواضيع تهم الجالية، مواضيع تهم أيضا المكتب وتهم الكلاينتس كلهم طبعا. فاليوم احنا صار اسبوعين ثلاثه نتحدث عن موضوع معين،
وهو اللي اذا عندك قضيه وعندك تريد تسوي اكبر يعني اعلى تسويه مبلغ،
أعلى
يعني تسوية مبلغ، شنو النقاط اللي لازم نتخذها. فاحنا صار لنا بالضبط مثل ما تفضلت، صار لنا اسبوعين نمشي بهالموضوع، وهالاسبوع نريد نكمل الموضوع لأنه جدا جدا مهم
جدا،
خاصة للجالية مالتنا.
فعلا، لأنه الكلاينتس دائما يحبون أنه يكون عندهم يحصل مبلغ أكبر مبلغ ممكن، لأنه هو متأذي.
بالضبط.
نعم.
As we spoke for the last 2 weeks, our subject is how to get the most and settle the most amount for the cases, yes. For the clients. We went over it for last 2 weeks. We went over very important points for our community here, and we would love to finish that subject, John.
Yes. So, and specifically, I think we were referring to the depositions and what happens in depositions and yes. all the various different types of questions yes. That the insurance companies are likely to ask. And you're right. So just to, but before we get there, I think we have an announcement we have to make, which is
what is it?
Which is that Tamara has been with the firm full 3 years as of today. So I just want
Lawrence Qaji's
at the KG Law Firm. That's
yes.
right,
yes.
exactly. So I just want to say congratulations to Tamara.
Thank you.
Which is wonderful.
واليوم
واليوم
وصدفت ويا البرنامج.
نعم.
And
جميل جدا.
And I hope I will
continue to
for another 3 at least.
No.
Or 30.
Well, I'm thinking to retire from there.
There you go. Not too soon, I hope.
No, not too soon. Not too soon yet.
But so that's
John,
wonderful.
I'm still young.
That's absolutely. That's why I said another 30 years.
Yes.
See, there you go.
Thank you.
But yes, so just to remind the listeners of what we were talking about a little bit last week. So we're talking about motor vehicle accidents, and specific within motor vehicle accidents, we're talking about, when you've been injured in a motor vehicle accident, you have a couple different kinds of claims, right? You have a first party, which is also called a personal injury protection claim, and then you have a bodily injury, also yes. known as a pain and suffering claim. And our firm does litigate both types of claims, and so that's what we're talking about.
مثل ما تفضل المحامي بأنه احنا تكلمنا صارنا الأسبوعين الماضية بأنه خاصة أكثر شيء يعني ركزنا بأنه على الإفادة.
نعم.
شنو النقاط المهمة بالإفادة اللي يعني من نسويها على مود الحادث. فنريد نكملها اليوم الحديث مالتنا we will go from there.
Yes, and just to remind the listeners, the first party case is generally speaking related to medical bills. It has to do with assistance around the house. It has to do with your lost wages, to the extent that you've lost any wages or money as a result of missing time at work. It has to do with prescription reimbursement, all of those things. But what it doesn't have to do with is pain and suffering, and that is the third party or bodily injury case.
Great.
مثل ما قلنا بالحلقات we have
a caller. Wonderful.
طبعا
we lost it.
يواصل الاتصال.
Yes.
You know what? Please feel free to call back. I'd be more than happy to take any questions. And if there are other listeners who have questions, please call us anytime.
المتصل إذا يقدر يرجع يتصل بينا رجاء نكون ممنونين. مثل ما تفضلنا بأنه القضية لها يعني كل قضية أكثر القضايا بها جزئين. الجزء الأول اللي هي نحن دائما نتكلم عن الطبابة. الطبابة زائدا الرواتب زائدا البلات. أهم شيء البلات تندفع.
نعم.
إذا أنت كان عندك insurance صحي لو كان عندك الانشورنس مال السيارة.
So last time where we left off was basically relating to your prior history, right?
Yes.
People are not only ever injured in one time in their life, right? People are injured multiple times.
Maybe many times. No, not only one time.
I mean, there's minor injuries, right? When you're a kid, you running into walls, falling downstairs, getting into fights with your siblings or whatever else. And there are all sorts of minor injuries that people receive. But what matters to, a motor vehicle accident case is if there are any major things that could be, or that the insurance company could conceivably believe that you're claiming are not related to an accident, right? So for example, if you had a back surgery a week before an accident, okay, and then you're in this accident, and then you have to go back into surgery. An insurance company is going to ask a question. Is the surgery that happened after the accident, is that related to the accident? Or is that related to your prior back issues? And that's a legitimate question.
مثل ما قلنا بأنه هواية من الأشخاص بأنهم عندهم أضرار جسدية قبل الحادث. بالضبط. فالأضرار الجسدية جدا جدا مهم بأنه تخبر المحامي مالتك شنو الأضرار الجسدية اللي قبل الحادث حتى نعرف شنو اللي نقدر نشوفه من قبل الحادث إلى وراء الحادث. كمثل واحد مسوي عملية قبل أسبوع بظهره وورا أسبوع صار عنده حادث واحتاج إلى عملية أخرى. الانشورنس أول سؤال راح تسأل هل هذا العملية الثانية من وراء الحادث أو من وراء بعد الحادث؟
بعد الحادث.
Right. And so in that case, it's important for people to remember, as far as the listeners go, just because you had a pre-existing condition doesn't mean you're not eligible for PIP benefits. A lot of insurance companies will try to tell you, hey, you had a prior problem and therefore we don't have to pay for it. But it's not that simple, because if your prior issue was aggravated by a motor vehicle accident, right? If you had said, yeah, I had some back pain before, but I was able to do my own cooking, cleaning, dishwashing.
And now I can't.
I was able to work. And now it's way worse. The pain is worse.
It's worse.
I can't do any of these things I used to do before. Well, then we can attribute that, at least potentially, to a motor vehicle accident.
واحدة من الأشياء اللي نقدر نسويها صح أنت كنت متضرر من قبل الحادث، بس هو الانشورنس طبعا دائما راح تقول
طبعا أنت فلوس
بالضبط، أو إحنا أنت ما تقدر تتعالج لأن هو هذا كان قبل الحادث وتظل ويا الانشورنس مالتك، بس هذا مو صحيح.
نعم.
إذا أنت تضررت من الحادث والجزء اللي كان متضرر صار أسوأ ونقدر نثبت بأنه كان أسوأ بالعلاجات الطبية وبالتقارير الطبية وبالتحاليل، معناته أنت عندك قضية. وإذا طلع نفسه فإذا هي مو من الحادث، من قبل الحادث. كل واحد التحمل مال الوجع همينه يكون شكل صح.
كل انسان شكل يعني
بالضبط.
ماكو اثنين سوا.
بالضبط. فاكو هوايه يعني عنده كسر ويقول لا انا زين، واكو هوايه ما عندهم كسر وما يقدر يتحرك مثلا. اهم شيء هي التقارير الطبيه والعلاجات، بانه هي تثبت شلون نقدر نحل هذا الاشكال.
Now, one of the things that's important is that you inform your attorney about this ahead of time, preferably, right? Because I think one of the problems that we encounter is people will, I'm not necessarily going to say hide, but they will forget to mention, or they won't think of it as important to disclose these prior conditions. And that can complicate things later when an insurance company comes back and says, hey, wait a minute, we don't want to pay because they already had this problem before, right? We're able to better build a case when it's disclosed to us. And similarly, the other important thing is for the client to be honest in a deposition setting. So when they're asked about this by the insurance company, they have to be honest about that then too. Because if they lie about it, then they can try to claim it's fraud.
They will lose, yeah.
And the insurance company probably has a note, they know about it already.
Well, and in many cases, insurance companies will request records. And I'll explain that, but yeah.
So مثل ما المحامي قال بأنه أهم شيء تكونون صادقين مع المحامي مالتك. قول الحقيقة، مرات الناس تنسى همينة، بس ما أعتقد واحد يقدر ينسى الوجع ماله.
مستحيل.
الأهم شيء بأنه تكون صريح ويا المحامي، تكون على نفس المستوى ويا المحامي، شنو اللي عندك، شنو الأشياء المتضررها قبل الحادث، إذا زادت وراء الحادث، وإذا ما زادت هم نكون صريح ويانا.
احنا دائما نقول حتى أنت تريد أنه تفوز بالقضية أو تكون صريح ويا المحامي، المحامي ما راح يطلع الاسرار هذا، هو وياك مو ويا ضدك.
بالضبط. لانه من راح تقعد قدام الانشورنس راح يسالوك هاي الاسئله كلها، وهم راح يطلبون من عنده، راح يطلبون كل المعلومات مالتك، وراح ندخل بالموضوع شويه اكثر.
اذا تفضل. Yes.
Now, there are certain things that are going to have nothing to do with an accident whatsoever. For example, if you're diagnosed with cancer, right? A motor vehicle accident is probably not going to change your cancer diagnosis at all, right? Or if you have, I don't know, high blood pressure or something like that, right? An accident is not necessarily going to affect everything, but nevertheless, it's good to disclose it because, frankly, I had a case one time where I had Medicare actually send me a lien on a case for $200,000 for cancer treatments, and I had to call up Medicare and let them know that that didn't have anything to do with our case. So you'd be surprised how often these things pop up, even when it sounds really silly for them to have done so.
You will keep continuing with the case if they send you like bill for 200.
What in that particular case, what I did, I just called Medicare and I said, I think you guys messed up because there's no way that
no way to pay
all these can't. No, I said there's no way that all these cancer treatments are related to the accident.
Yes.
And they went, oh, oops, sorry, and they, we managed to resolve it.
مثلا مو كل الأضرار الجسدية تصير من حادث.
نعم.
أكو أمراض يعني واحد يصير عنده ما لها علاقة بالحادث نهائيا، وطبعا واحد من عندها السرطان كانسر، هذا ما له علاقة بالحادث. بس احنا لازم نخبر، إذا خاصة نخبر كل الانشورنس الصحي، اي انشورنس صحي، اي شخص عنده قضيه لازم نخبرهم بانهم كانوا بحادث سياره، ولازم نقول لهم شنو الاجزاء المتضرره من وراء هذا الحادث، لانه حتى اخاف يتعالجون عن طريق ميديكيت لو ميديكير، لازم الانشورنس السياره
يعرف بها،
هو يكون المسؤول على دفع هذه القوائم وليس الانشورنس الصحي. واحدة من المثل بأنه إحنا كان عندنا قضية، الزبون كان مريض بالسرطان، ميديكير دزت لنا فاتورة مالت $200,000 بأنه علاجه مال السرطان ما له علاقة بهذا بالحادث، واتصلنا بهم وتأكدنا بأنه هو هذا ما له
ما له علاقة
بالحادث.
بالحادث.
فيعني القضية مو بس احنا نحكي ويا انشورنس لو ويا طبيب، احنا نحكي ويا هواية ناس وهواية بيها شغل، يعني وراء الكواليس.
وراء فعلا هي هاي شغلكم.
Yes.
هو هذا
Yes.
متعب يعني، مو سهل، ماكو شيء سهل.
I just added that it is not just talking to a doctor or to
hospital
or
or something.
hospital.
Right.
There's a lot we do behind the scenes for the case. نشتغل بيها.
صحيح.
لازم الكل تعرف، ولازم من نسوي تسوية كل شيء يكون مصفر ومتأكدين ماكو أي واحد عليه دفع لوش، هاي كلها لأنه هذا كله إحنا مسؤولين عليه.
صحيح.
So, anyway, with that said, there's a lot of things in your prior medical past that could be relevant, that you'd be asked about in a deposition, that can affect the value of your case. And that can range from prior injuries, accidents, it can be pre-existing conditions, it can be hospitalizations, it can be prior surgeries, it could be just a history of which doctors you've seen. But all of those things they will go into, because in a motor vehicle accident case, you are putting your health at issue, and therefore the defense has the option to explore that medical history as part of the discovery process where the parties exchange information.
النقطة الأخرى بأنه ليش إحنا نأكد ونرد نأكد بأنه إذا عندك أي أضرار جسدية قبل الحادث، لأنه الإنشورنس إلها حق تشوف كل التقارير الطبية، أي مستشفى أنت رايح لها، أي طبيب رايح
يعني
إلهم حق
نعم.
يسحبون كل التقارير الطبية حتى يقارنون. شغلهم يدفعون أقل مبلغ ممكن
تعويض.
شغلنا نجيب أكبر مبلغ ممكن للتعويض.
نعم.
فلذلك لازم احنا نكون يعني صريحين ويا المحامي مالتنا.
ممتاز.
And I think we started to mention this last time, but I just want to mention this again. If they were involved in an accident, or they had a slip and fall at work, or they had any kind of surgery or hospitalization after the accident, the insurance company is also going to ask about that, because they want to make sure that it's not related to something. If you're treating for those things that could have been injured in that, is that now related to the accident, or is that related to the subsequent, let's say, slip and fall or workers' compensation claim? So they'll also ask you about those things.
كذلك يسألوك بأنه هل أنت مثلا زحلقت وقعت أو تضررت بالشغل تأذيت. هم يريدون يعرفون، لأنه كل وحدة شو وقت صارت قبل الحادث، ورا الحادث، لو الأضرار الجسدية هل هي لازم تكون عن طريق الإنشورنس سيارة، لو عن طريق الإنشورنس مال الشغل، لو عن طريق الإنشورنس مالتك. فلازم احنا كل هذا نشتغل بيه ون make it clear، نسويه واضح.
Yeah. Now, we've talked a lot about, medical history and things they're going to ask you about in terms of, finish in most cases. So what happened in the accident? They're going to ask you, first of all, when was it? What was the date? What was the time? What was the weather like? Okay, was it raining? Was it snowing? Was there ice on the ground? All those sorts of things.
واحدة من الأشياء اللي يسألوها على الحادث، أول شيء يا يوم صار الحادث،
نعم.
أي ساعة، كيف كان الجو، هل كان ممطر، هل كان بثلج، كان صباح مساء. هاي الأسئلة كلها راح يسألوها.
No.
Now, a lot of people might immediately think okay, that makes sense. But there's another group who might be thinking, well, wait a minute, why do they need to know all that? I was in an accident, right? But it's important to remember that at least for some cases, especially if you're making a bodily injury claim, that means you're alleging that someone else is at fault for this accident.
Yeah.
Right. And so if there are extenuating circumstances around the accident, that could change the level of liability for the at-fault party. Like, for example, if the person that hit you was first hit by someone else, maybe it's not their fault, maybe it's someone else's fault.
أول شيء يشوفون منو اللي هو المسؤول عن الحادث. مرات الشخص اللي ضربك مو هو المسؤول عن الحادث. مثلا أكو سيارة قبل ما هو ضربته
نعم.
واضطر بهاي الضربة قوية
يضربك
بأنه انضربت أنت. فهاي أكو هواية أسئلة أو لازم تتجاوب عن طريق
المحامي نفسه
الكلاينت. احنا نحضر الكلاينت مثل ما قلنا.
نعم.
تقريبا ساعتين قبل
القضية قبل اليوم المرافعة أو السؤال،
نفس يوم الإفادة.
نعم.
تقريبا ساعتين نقعد
صحيح
ويا الزبون ونفهمه كل هاي الأشياء.
Yeah, and so one of the things that they talk about is what road were you on, where were you traveling from, where were you going to, what intersections were you at, and they try to get a whole picture of an accident to see what happened. And it's really interesting in my experience how you can ask someone what happened on one day and then ask them another day, and there are little details that people will forget the first time they tell a story that they'll remember later, or vice versa.
This will affect the case.
That's a really good question, and the answer, it depends on the details, right? Because because you will change what you mentioned in the first time. Well, let's say that they tell you the first time it happened at 11, and then later they say, well, it actually happened about 11:05.
Oh,
that's no big deal, right? There's no change there. But if they say, well, hey, I was hit by a car and then they took off, but later they tell you, well, hey, by the way, I have their license plate. Those are two majorly important factors, right? Like, because one is a hit and run accident essentially, and the other one is, well, wait a minute, now we can identify the party and possibly go after them. Okay, so it depends on the details.
التفاصيل جدا مهمة بوقت الحادث، وراح يسألون أسئلة دقيقة، ومرات يخابرون مرت الأخة ويسألون نفس الأسئلة. واحد يكون يعني أولا صريح، ثانيا إيش قد ما يقدر يتذكر يقول الحقيقة، وإذا ما يتذكر أحسن شيء لي يخمن.
يسكت.
مو يسكت، ما أتذكر، خلاص
أفضل يعني.
أفضل.
نعم.
أي مرات مثلا، لأنه مرات يقدرون يستعملون أي شيء تقوله ضدك همينة. مرات تقدر تقول مثلا الحادث صار واحد ضربني وانهزم، وبعدين ثاني يوم تقول بس أنا أخذت
البليت
مالته بالضبط،
يعني
رقم السيارة. هذا تغيير كامل بالقضية
طبعا، لأن هذا مو هيت أند ران.
بالضبط. هاي نقدر نروح ورا اللي نطلع من الرقم
السيارة،
منو الأونر مال السيارة، ونقدر نروح وراهم ونعرف.
هذه أسهل الشغلة
بالضبط. هاي أشياء جدا جدا مهمة.
But see, it's also really interesting because even slight variations of the story can change completely who's at fault. And I'm going to give you a real specific example.
Yes.
So in general, let's say that we have a driver, okay? And I have 1,000 of these types of cases. I have a driver who's going straight, and there's another driver that pulls out from, let's say, a Kroger parking lot or a gas station, any business, and they pull out in front of that driver, and that driver hits them. So I'm just going to ask you, who do you think is at fault in that situation as I've laid it out? So there's one person going straight, and there's one person that's turning in front of the person going straight. Who's at fault, do you think?
The second one.
You think the person who's turning in front of and yes. I would agree with you with no other facts.
But they will say no.
Well, no. Well, they might say yes, they might say no. Yeah. But now what if I add a different fact in here? What if the guy that's going straight, okay, was going 45 miles an hour, and the speed limit there was only 25 miles an hour.
Oh, that's...
Now who's at fault? Do you see?
So that 45.
Well,
the guy who was driving 45.
Well, and there's the question, because, and I'm going to let you translate this first, but there's a question as to who's at fault when their two stories are a little bit different.
حتى لا تصير اشكال بالنسبه للناس، اشرحيها.
يس. الأهم شيء بالقضية نشوف منو الغلطان.
نعم.
لأنه القضية مسارها يتغير جدا. مثلا المحامي جان قال مثل بأنه أنت دا تمشي بطريقك عدل، دا تمشي قدام.
نعم.
واحد طلع من صفحة من باركينج لات، أهم شيء من باركينج لات أو من gas station
يعني باركينج لات
أي من هذا الستريب مول من أي شيء. وطلع قدامك وضربته أنت من ورا. منو الغلطان هنا؟ أنت تفضلت أستاذ ساهر قلت لا اللي طلع قدامي هو الغلطان يعني. وإحنا أنا 100% وياك، أنا
نعم.
ما أقول هو غلطان
زي.
بس أكو هواية أشياء لها علاقة بهذا الحادث. هذا اللي يمشي عدل، هل كان دا يمشي ويا سريع ويا السرعة المحددة أسرع؟ بها هواية أشياء يعني حولها
تصير قضية.
صح لا مو صحيح؟
صحيح.
So then the interesting situation comes into play where let's say that again we've got this person going straight, this person's pulling in front of him, and the person who pulls out says, well, wait a minute, the guy who's going straight, that person was speeding, right? But the person going straight says, no, I wasn't. All right. And then it becomes a question of fact. Now, who's at fault? I don't know. Right. And in fact, the only way you can really determine that is frequently by a jury, or unless you settle the case ahead of time. So what I guess I'm getting at is a concept called comparative liability or comparative negligence, which we have in Michigan, where essentially you can have two parties, each who have done something slightly wrong, and then you try to figure out who is more at fault. Okay. But in order for you to have a bodily injury or pain and suffering claim in Michigan, you have to be less than 50% at fault in order to have a claim. So if you are 51% at fault, you get nothing.
Oh God.
Yeah. النقطة اللي نحكي بها هي المهمة بأنه منو السيناريو اللي هسه قلناه احتمال اثنيناتهم هم غلطانين، بأنه الشخص اللي يمشي عدل مسرع والشخص اللي طلع من البلازا المفروض هم ينتظر على ما got a call.
Oh great.
صوت الغد تفضلوا. الو.
You're on the air.
No.
So
they don't like our voice.
I think they love our voices. That's why they're calling us. But the lines are not cooperating with us.
Yes. This tends to happen a lot with cell phones these days, I've noticed.
Yes.
Happened.
بالتليفونات السلفون تصير هواية من تحكي مع المقابلك ما يسمعك.
I can't tell you how many calls I have where people try to call in, even to the office, and I'm in the middle of a conversation, it just drops for no reason.
هذا أزعج شيء.
Very frustrating.
خصوصا إذا تكون مناطق ترى يوقف الخط.
صحيح.
So if you're hearing this and you have questions, please feel free to call us or call back and
586-825-2015. رقم تليفون المحامي لورنس قاجي هو المكتب هو 248-702-6641. عندهم الاستشارات مجانية. أي واحد عنده أي مشكلة الاستشارة مجانية يقدر يتصل، يتكلمون اللغة العربية والإنجليزية.
Yeah. And so the bottom line is essentially what we are looking at is, are there other rules of the road that were violated by one party or the other?
Yeah, I didn't finish
I'll
the
let you
translation.
finish.
Yeah,
sorry.
So هنا نجي بأنه نشوف منو الأكثر غلطان. لازم واحد الغلط مالته 51% فيكون الغلط عليه.
نعم.
والآخر يكون 49% حتى يكون هو المغلطان. فهنا تجي بأنه تجي
زين شلون هاي يصير الجوري لو شلون
اكو اذا صعدنا للمحكمة العليا اكو محلفين.
نعم.
قبل ما نصعد اكو يشوفون البلاك بوكس مال السيارة، يشوفون اذا اكو اي كاميرات بالمنطقة حتى يشوفون يشوفون نوع الضربة قوتها
وطريقتها.
يطلعون اخصائيين يشوفون هالشيء. سو هواي اكو اشياء مدايرها.
نعم.
Now, I heard you add a few things there about cameras and black boxes.
Yes. Well, he asked before the juries, they could also have the black boxes to be checked, or cameras, or how the impact of the car together, how severe it is, where it is. They will have special investigators to see that.
Yeah, and I think it's also important that sometimes, there's a lot of evidence around that you can also gather on your own, in a sense. If there's a business nearby, cameras, you really cannot in Michigan frequently get access to light cameras. They're not maintained. But businesses have a lot of cameras, and if you go into a business after an accident and ask them, some businesses will provide that to you if they have it available.
And they're same place of the
خاصة إذا بتقاطع أكو gas station لو شيء. دائما نفضل بأنه الشخص نفسه يروح لأبو الجاس ستيشن ورأسا يصور إذا يخليه. لأنه خاصة بميشيغان هواي ناس تقول أكو بالتقاطع كاميرات. هاي الكاميرات مو تاخذ يعني فيلم مال حوادث. هذا إذا يشوفون كم سيارة تفوت مثلا بهالتقاطع من فترات لفترات، يشوفون الضوء الأحمر والأخضر، يعني هالأشياء. مو لأنه إذا صار حادث أكو كاميرا،
بس أكو هم
جدا قليل جدا جدا قليل. ومي ميشيغان ستيت ما تسوي تحديث لهالاشياء، صعبه نحصلها من عندهم.
يعني يصير الاعتماد على المحلات اللي عندهم او البزنسز اللي عندهم كاميرات.
or sometimes in a subdivision.
Yes.
مرات تصير بالسبديفيجن، يعني بمكان يعني بالمحله. اكثر الناس هسه عندهم كاميرات بالباب وشايفته. يعني هوايه زبائن يجيبون الكاميرات مال وين التقاطع لو وين هاي من مال البيوت ونشوفها.
صح.
وكلش تفيد
طبعا.
And sometimes there are dash cams on a vehicle. I mean, there's all sorts of ways that there could be evidence, but there are also a surprisingly large number of cases where there really aren't anything either. And at the end of the day, if there isn't a specific camera that caught the accident, in a clear way, you still end up having testimony be the major source of evidence. That is, what did one person say happened, and what did another person say happened? Were there any witnesses at the scene?
أهم شيء هو الشهود. يعني the witnesses.
وأكو حالات ماكو، ما تقدر تحصل أي شيء.
لأنه ماكو لا شاهد ولا أكو شيء ولا كاميرا ولا
ماكو أي شيء. بهيك حالة بما أنه إحنا رافعين قضية على الإنشورنس، العاتق علينا لازم نثبت،
تبحثون همنا
نثبت بأنه هذا الحادث صار ومو صوت الزبون. إذا ما عندنا أي إثبات نقدر نجيبه، مع الأسف يكون الزبون هو الغلطان. لا ما تخسر. عنده بعد مال الطبابه.
شاي ما طبابه. لا بدنا نحكي على
على
الاكسيدنت، يعني على التعويض
مال العطل وضرر.
صح.
بما معنى انت عندك واحد عطل وضرر، هذا هو خصم الكلام.
Now, some of the things that aren't necessarily dispositive, but can make a difference. Did one of the drivers admit fault at the scene and say, "I'm sorry, it was all my fault"? That can make a difference, and that can be admissible. That can be admissible in court. Or, was one driver given a ticket for a specific offense? I mean, again, not necessarily dispositive, but it can make a difference, especially for the insurance companies who love to look at police reports and tickets. Or, was there anything odd about the other driver? Did they seem like they were drunk? Right?
But there's a lot of people that he said, like, it's my fault. Then he changed his words.
So if they change their story, then that goes to their credibility, right? So that's one of those things there where, if you end up in front of a jury, if you've changed your story 4 times, that's
4 times.
Well, if you've changed your story even once, it's going to look questionable. If you change your story more than once, then it's going to really start looking questionable. So it's all a question of whether you seem credible to a jury.
عدة حالات همينة يكون الشخص اللي مسبب الحادث
نعم
يعترف للشرطي، يقول أنا غلطان،
نعم.
أنا غلطت. لو يعني أكو هواية أشياء تثبت وما تثبت، فالعاتق علينا بأنه نثبت أكو الغلط مو غلطك وغلط شخص آخر. مثلا عندك هو ماخذ تكت، طال الشرطي تكت، هل هو على المخدرات أو شارب، هاي هم يعني يكون هو الغلطان.
نعم.
يعني أكو هواية أسباب واكو هم ماكو أسباب.
وانتم تجمعون ايضا هذه الاسباب.
طبعا.
نعم.
Now, I wanted to move on a little bit actually to some of the benefits and how they ask you about the benefits. Because,
The main thing.
because you know, right. I mean,
كلها
because,
مين
كلها the main.
كلها مين.
because you know
كلها
what
أساسية.
everybody wants to know is
What are the benefits?
what am I going to get out
What
of
can
this
I
at
get?
the end of the day, right?
Yes.
So you know, I think it's and we've talked about this on the shows in the past.
Yeah,
but
we did.
But I think it's good to go over those again, and then what they're going to ask you about when it comes to those benefits.
مثل ما يعني حكينا على هالموضوع عدة مرات.
نعم.
شنو هو اللي راح يطلع لي من هاي القضية؟ شنو هاي الأسئلة؟ ليش؟ ايش راح يسألوني على مود أحصل أي شيء من هاي الأسئلة؟
نعم.
Yeah, and again, this is just to remind the listeners, this is relating to benefits that you're getting from a motor vehicle accident where you were injured, right? So
وهاي الأشياء اللي راح تحصلها بأنه أنت تضررت من وراء حادث السيارة.
Right. So, I guess we'll just go through them. First thing is lost wages, right? For PIP benefits, one of the things that just about everybody is entitled to, if you were employed or working in some capacity before the accident,
Weight loss.
and that's right, and you're injured in that accident, you can't work as a result of your injuries, you get wage loss. You got it exactly. Up to 85% of your
I like
lost
it.
wages are compensable under the
thank
No
you.
Fault Act.
I like it because he said it. It is.
He did.
He said it. It's wage loss. It is wage loss.
That's what it is.
It is صحيح لأنه مو الكل تتذكرها. وفتشي يعني it's really good. واحدة من الأشياء بأنه إذا أنت ضررت من حادث وبعد ما تقدر تشتغل تريد رواتبك. مرات الرواتب ما تجي رأسا مباشرة مع الأسف، تجي إلا مرات ويا التسوية إذا أكو عراقيل بالقضية.
يعني يبقى سنتين
نعم.
سنة.
نعم.
And this is one of the biggest items, right, that people are worried about, because if you're injured in an accident, if you're injured in an accident and you can't work, I mean, what is it? Something like 65% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck,
Yes.
or maybe more.
Yeah.
I mean, if you all of a sudden can't work, that's going to make a huge difference.
If he don't receive one check, it will affect his life.
That's right. That's right.
Totally.
100%.
100%.
Yes.
مثل ما تفضل، أهم شيء بأنه عندنا إحنا استقرار بالدخل. أي شيء يصير بالدخل،
خلخلة،
أي شيء،
أي توقف
راح يأثر.
صح.
يأثر مو بس عليك،
كل شيء،
على العائلة، نفسيتك، على كل شيء. يعني واحد هو مرات
معتمد على الشكل
بالضبط. وخاصة هسه ويا الحالة هسه كل شيء صار أغلى وأكبر، ويعني ويا التضخم يعني صعبة كلش بأنه صح. أنت ما يدخل لك أي دخل وأنت معتمد من راتب الراتب.
صحيح.
وتقريبا 65 إلى 70% من الناس بدأ يعتمدون على هالشيء حاليا.
نعم.
هذا فشي جدا مهم بأنه نحصل لهم رواتبهم.
صحيح.
But see, and we've talked about this before, that people are entitled to a wage loss benefit, but what is it they're going to ask you about when it comes to a deposition, when it comes to your lost wages? Well, they're going to ask you, where were you working, right? Who were you working for? Who was your boss? What were your hours? What were you earning per hour if it's an hourly, or what was your salary if it's a salary? These are basic things. But they're also going to ask you a lot more than just that.
طبعا من راح يسألوك على الشغل مالتك، راح يسألوك أولا وين تشتغل، منو مالتك المدير، شو اسم المدير مالتك، إيش قد تأخذ بالساعة، إذا أنت تشتغل بالساعة، لو إذا تشتغل كراتب إيش قد راتبك الشهري أو كل أسبوعين. يسألوك كم ساعة تشتغل، هل ومو بس هاي الأسئلة، نوع العمل اللي تسوي، وبعد إذا أنت تشتغل يعني ساعات أكثر من 40 ساعة
over
Yeah.
time.
So, so here's what's really interesting. So let's say that you have a situation in which you have someone who's injured in a motor vehicle accident.
Yes.
Okay. And let's say that you know that they have injured their foot. Okay. And in fact, it's so bad, they can't walk for 2 months. And so they say, guess what? I've been out of work for 2 months. Well, the insurance company is going to ask them about their job duties. Well, what do you do at your job? Right? And if their response is, well, I have to run, I'm a stock person at a store, and I have to run back and forth and put boxes on the shelf, and I have to put, do all these things where I have to be moving around. I think
Now I can't.
And now I can't because of the injury. I think that makes sense.
الانشورنس تسأل شنو نوع العمل. إذا مثلا أنت كنت متضرر برجليك، صار يعني الضرر، وتسألك شنو أنت نوع عملك. أنت كنت تشتغل بستور ولازم تحط الأغراض على الشلفات،
نعم.
تروح وتجي وتركض، هاي كلش واضحة بأنه أنت ما تقدر تشتغل.
Or maybe a more extreme situation, maybe they're a professional soccer player. If their foot is injured, you can guarantee they're going to be upset about that. And they're going to be losing some money.
100%.
لو مثلا أنت رياضي، لاعب طوبة أو أي رياضة لها علاقة بالركض، همين أنت يعني متضرر، همين يعني فشي كلش واضح بأنه أنت ما راح تقدر تسوي الشيء اللي تريده.
But now let me change it a little bit and say, what if they weren't a professional soccer player? What if they weren't someone who had to move around a lot? What if there's someone who all they have to do is remote work from home while they're sitting at their desk? And they're saying that they've been off work for 2 months because of injuries in an accident. The insurance company is going to want to know why they can't continue to do that kind of work.
إذا عندك نفس الضرر برجليك، بس أنت تشتغل من البيت ورا الكمبيوتر قاعد، وتقول لهم صار لي شهرين ما أشتغل. الانشورنس تريد تعرف ليش ما تقدر تشتغل، شنو الأسباب اللي ما تخليك تقدر تشتغل
أنت ما عندك مشي،
شغلك قاعدة بالبيت وتقدر تمدد رجليك وتشتغل بالكمبيوتر.
Right. Because remember, you have to be off work due to the injuries sustained in the accident. If you're off work for something else, okay, like let's say just because you don't have a car anymore, that's actually not compensable wage loss. It has to, generally speaking, be related to your injuries. So if your car, because your answer might be, well, hey, my car was damaged in the accident, I couldn't get to work, but that's not really sufficient,
مرات همين صح هم ما يقدرون يشتغلون، بس يقول له أنا ما أقدر أشتغل لأن ما عندي سيارة.
سيارتي انصدمت،
تأذت، هذا ما يعتبر سبب.
And by the way, that's doubly true if they're working from home.
هذا بعد يعني لازم لأنه أنت مدى تروح للشغل مو لأنه أنت مدى
أنت already أنت بالبيت تشتغل
متضرر، بس لأنه أنت ما عندك سيارة. بالضبط.
So, and I've had attorneys actually go through everything that someone has done on a typical work day, right? Like if they're a factory worker and they say, well, I'm a floor person in the factory. They'll say, okay, well, what does that entail? Well, I have a machine that I'm pushing down to, stamp auto parts. Okay, well, what's the machine? Tell me about the parts. Are you lifting any parts?
They want to know everything.
They want to know every little thing
all
about
the specific.
Yeah.
إذا تشتغل أنت بمعمل يريدون يعرفون بالضبط شنو شغلك، شنو نوع الشغل، شو تشيل، شو تحط، شنو الجزء اللي أنت تشتغله، كل شيء يعني يتعمقون بكل الأشياء اللي يريدون يعرفوها.
إنه يقللون المبلغ.
بالضبط.
بالضبط. So anyway, one of the major benefits, that's wage loss. Another one is what we call replacement or household services, right? And again, we've talked about this in the past, but household services are things that you used to do for yourself that could be like cleaning, cooking, dishwashing, laundry, outside work. These are things you used to do for yourself in the past
but now you can't.
That you can no longer do because of the injury sustained in the accident.
واحدة من الأشياء الأخرى مثل ما احنا قلناها وراح نعيدها مرة أخرى بأنه هي المساعدة البيتية. المساعدة البيتية اللي هي تتضمن الطبخ، التنظيف، غسل الملابس، العفو الزبالة، تنظيف البر. هل هاي الأشياء اللي أنت كنت تسويها لازم أنت كنت تسويها قبل الحادث؟
نعم.
واللي انت ما تقدر تسويها ورا الحادث. اذا انت ما كنت تسويها قبل الحادث ما تقدر تحصلها، ما لك حق تحصلها.
Right. And I think it's important to point out that these are things that the person actually did for themselves, because a lot of people are married, right? A lot of people have large families and they divide up the chores in different ways. Now, in a lot of cases, one person may be responsible for, let's say, the laundry and the cooking and the cleaning, and another person might be responsible for doing the outside work, right? Or maybe everybody's responsible for cleaning up after themselves and everybody shares in all the other chores. But they're going to ask you about it either way, okay? Because you're only entitled to get what are called household replacement services if these are things that you did, that someone is taking over for you. So, for example, if you never mowed the lawn a day in your life before the accident, and then after the accident, you say, well, hey, I needed help because I couldn't mow the lawn, that's not going to cut it.
مثل ما قلنا بأنه لازم أنت تكون مسوي هاي هاي الأشياء البيتية أنت تسويها بنفسك قبل الحادث، اللي هي هسه أنت تحتاج مساعدة بها
وهسه ما تقدر تسويها.
ما تقدر. إذا أنت ما كنت تسويها ما تقدر تحصلها لأنه ما إلها.
How you prove?
That's a great question.
اكو اشياء مثلا تقدر انت تسوي جزء من عندها.
نعم.
مو كلها. تقدر تسال على جزء من عندها. هي $20 بالنهار.
نعم.
صح لا مو صحيح؟
صح.
فال $20 اذا تسوي 10 اشياء ولا تسوي 5 اشياء لك حق تاخذ ال $20.
So you had asked a great question. How do you prove it? How do you show what was
that you was doing this,
that you were doing it before
can't.
and then now you can't?
Yeah.
Right. So there's two things. First, if you're part of a household, usually there's going to be other people who are going to know what you do as well, or at least some of it.
Yeah, but they are your family.
Right. Well, I mean, but listen, if you said, hey, you know what, before the accident, I was responsible for the outdoor chores. And your wife says, hey, before the accident, he was responsible for the outdoor chores. And then your son says, hey, before the accident, yeah, he mowed the lawn all the time. And he did the grass clipping.
Drive me school.
Sure.
Yes.
You know, I mean, if it's all consistent, I mean, that in and of itself is evidence. There's testimonial evidence, right? That means people are testifying that this is how it was. That's the first thing.
أول شيء حتى نثبت أكو يعني عندك الأهل وياك بالبيت.
نعم.
هم يقولون الشخص كان يسوي هيك، الشخص كان يسوي هيك. أبسط شيء عائلة صغيرة عندهم أطفال، الأب تضرر، الأم هي أكثر شيء ما أريد يعني أسوي تفرقة. بس الأم أكثر شيء تأخذ الأشياء على عاتقها.
تتحملها.
بس إذا أكو أطفال مثلا، هذا كمثل، الأب همينه يساعد بالأطفال.
صحيح.
يشيلهم يوديهم مدرسة، يجيبهم، يشتري لهم مسواق، أي شيء له علاقة بها، يغسل لهم يعني هاي كلها أعمال بالضبط. فهاي إثباتات أكيد يعني الأهل همينه راح يثبتون بأنه أنت كنت تسوي
كان يسويها
بالضبط.
Yeah. Now, in addition, for those things that you've had done on your behalf, you can actually just keep a log of those things. You can say, you know what, either you or the person who's helping you can write a log, and you can sign it and say, hey, these are all the things that I needed help with and they helped me with. And we actually provide our clients with logs that they can fill out and document exactly what the assistance is that they've received. And so there is a way to prove that.
واحدة من الإثباتات همينة بأنه إحنا ننطي للزباين جداول خاصة بأنه تثبت بأنه أنت كل يوم شنو المساعدة اللي تحتاجها، شنو اللي سوينا، الشخص اللي ساعدك، شنو هي الأشياء اللي ساعدك بها يوميا. أكو كل يوم شكل طبعا أكيد، لو أكو أشياء لازم تصير يوميا نفسها. اكو جداول خاصه تملي
موجودة.
وتتوقع،
نعم.
واحنا نساعد الزبون بنفس بهالشيء ونعلمه شلون يستعملها.
صحيح.
Now, in addition to showing that these are things that you used to do for yourself and that you need help with and someone did help you with after the accident, there's actually a second element to replacement services, and that is that there has to be an agreement between the two people. So that there has to be an agreement between the injured person and the person who's helping them, that the person helping will get paid, whether that's through reimbursement from the insurance company or whether it's through the individual who's receiving the services. There has to be some kind of agreement or expectation of payment in order to get paid. And this is one of the biggest things that insurance companies love to ask about. And I'm going to give you a very clear example after the translation.
واحدة من الأسئلة تسألها الانشورنس للزبون بأنه هل أنت يعني promise
either an agreement or an expectation of payment.
بأنه أنت قلت للطرف الآخر أني أدفع لك، لو أنت توافقتوا اثنيناتكم بأنه هو يدفع لك على أي شيء يخدمك به. هنا يجي هواية
نعم.
الناس تقول شو أنا ما جتني فلوس مال الخدمة، ليش طلعت هالقد قليلة مثلا راح يقول المحامي ليش.
So here's a great example of a question that insurance companies love to use to trip up the clients. So you're married, right?
Yes.
If you were injured in
I have to think about it.
Hold on. She's not listening, right? No,
she is.
Well, then we better get this right. No. So if you were injured in an auto accident,
yes.
Okay, I would guess the person who'd be most likely to help you out after an accident would be your wife. Am I right?
Yes, right.
Okay. So in order for you or her, in this case, to be compensated for the injury, okay, there has to be an agreement between you and your wife that she will be compensated for the services she's providing you, okay? And now, one of the things that a lot of the insurance companies will do is they'll say, well, wait a minute, you're married, right? Yes. Well, wouldn't she help you out anyway? And I dislike that question a lot because people can do things for more than one reason. They'll say, isn't your wife really helping you because she loves you? And you'd be like, well, yes, she's helping me because she loves me, but she also understands and is aware that she's entitled to reimbursement from you guys, the insurance company, and we're expecting that payment, right? Because people can do things for more than one reason.
هذه حلوة
جدا مهمة. الانشورنس راح تسأل الزبون.
نعم.
اوكي انت متزوج وصار لكم هالقد متزوجين.
نعم.
لازم يعرفون هم ايش قد صار لك متزوج وكل
نعم.
شيء. يقول لك اوكي هي كانت تساعدك، هي مو تحبك، هي مو تداريك قبل الحادث، ليش لازم هسه تدفع لها حتى تداريك
مثلا؟
الجواب احنا هذا السؤال الوحيد اللي احنا دائما احنا ما نحبه. بس الزبون دائما نحضره ونقول له بانه يكون صريح ويقول بس هي هم لها حق بأن تاخذ مبلغ بأنه لأنه هي تساعدني أكثر من قبل.
And you know, there's a real reason why this exists in the statute. People who have to take their time out of their day to care for their loved ones can be entitled to compensation and should get compensation too, right? I mean, people have to take time off of work to help out their loved ones sometimes.
Yeah.
They have to
not just work, even from their time
and their own. That's what I was going to say. And
their rest time.
Yeah, their rest time.
Yeah,
exactly.
Rest time, yeah. Their recreation, right? Maybe they would have gone out with their friends on a Friday night, and instead they're doing the laundry and mowing the lawn. And guess what? I don't have time because now I got to come in and help them out with all this stuff.
Have coffee with my friends or do something.
Exactly.
هاي كلها لها حق بأنه إحنا I'm gonna add something.
Sure.
المشكلة وين إحنا هاي أمي هاي مرتي شلون أقولها تعالي خذي فلوس لو أنطيها فلوس
ترى موجودة
صح. وأما ليش دا أقول لك أنا ما أجيب من كيفي الحكي لأنه أنا شايف بالضبط تجارب وشايفتها والناس تقول لي بس هذا أقول لهم هذا حقكم، هذا حق اللي لكم من الانشورنس كمباني لازم يطلع إلكم. وصح هي أمك، لو أختك، لو أخوك، لو زوجتك، بس هذا همنا إلكم حق به. وصح عن محبة وعن
بس
احتراما،
هذا حق.
بس هذا حق.
نعم.
بما أنه أنت مسوي a lot, especially mostly I don't know about your culture, John, sorry, but in the Arabic culture, they always say, she's my mom, she's my dad, she's my brother, my sister. And how can I, ask her to pay me?
Right.
So I said, but this is your rights, and
Exactly.
and you are entitled for it.
And just to conclude, it's also important to point out that everyone, even if they're opting out of PIP benefits, if they have a no-fault policy in Michigan, they are paying for lost wages and these household or replacement services as part of their policy premium. So whether or not it, you are paying for this policy.
They pay this money by time, or
everyone who has a motor vehicle policy,
or
an
they
auto
have
policy.
to wait
الانشورنس من تشتري البي اي بي البيب. قلنا مرات الناس ما تاخذه، بس انت لا، كل واحد مشتريه ويدفع كل شهر. تريد البيب لو ما تريده موجود غصبا مع الكل.
طبعا. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for having us. As always, it's wonderful.
وشكرا ست تمارة.
يا أهلا وسهلا.
مستمعينا الأكارم، مشاهدينا الأعزاء، كنا مع برنامج المحامي لورنس قاجي، ونشكر طبعا العزيز جان وأيضا الأخت العزيزة تمارة. نلتقيكم إن شاء الله في الأسبوع القادم وحلقة جديدة، ويكون معنا إن شاء الله المحامي لورنس قاجي. إلى اللقاء.